Hello, Hockey World. Hello, I'm going to do it right now. Here I go. Ready? Hello, Hockey World. It is Tuesday, November 27, 2018.
I'm Michael Lagello.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology. Sorry, Peter. Just saw you there.
Oh, no, we can't hear Peter.
I'm Peter Tessier from Winnipeg.
Ha ha ha. And then doing the Genesis Mama thing from
He
yesterday.
was doing that yesterday, yeah.
Nah, maybe unplug your microphone again.
Yeah, unplug the USB and just keep going. He'll get there eventually.
How's that? There we go.
There you go. Yes.
If I plug in my mixing board, it all works. I got
There you
new
go.
gear yesterday. I got a new mic. I got a new little mixing board.
Sound good.
Yeah.
Sound really good. And that's Peter Tessier. I am Eklund, and you're watching the HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday. This time to fill you in the comings and goings of the hockey world. And I'm dressed up today not because I had to go to a christening or a baptism, but because I had to go to the arena and do a press conference. And I just
No, you had to go to a funeral. That's what you went to.
Oh man, we'll get into that. But I'm not quite as down as Mike is on this whole situation, obviously. But I just was down at the Wells Fargo Center and for the press conference held by Holmgren and
Dave Scott.
Dave Scott, who is the new face of the ownership of the Flyers, kind of.
He's the CEO of the team, and he's part of Comcast. That's what
right. He's the bridge between the owners and the team, I guess. So,
right.
I guess he's more the new Peter Luco, right, than anything else. So,
yes, that's what it's akin to.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. So anyway, Dave Scott was down there, and there was an interesting press conference for a lot of reasons because it is one of the best things about being there, and I don't know how well this translates into on when you're watching on TV or not, but is I like I was taught this by a really famous hockey writer who told me never to share this information with anybody else, that he told me this, but this is what he told me. He said that whenever you're at a press conference with two or more people up there, watch the other person who's not answering when the question is being answered. And it is always my favorite thing to do because
that's actually good advice.
You know what I mean? Because Holmgren's talking and Scott. So to me, the most there were two really telling points. One, when Carter Hart's name came up, and Holmgren paused for a very long time before he responded to it. And finally to say that no, Carter Hart, he's on the same page with Hextall and Carter Hart. But a little background on Holmgren. Like when you talk to people around the league about Paul Holmgren, when you talk to agents about Paul Holmgren, they all say the same thing. They all say they love him. He's a great guy, and
he's an excellent guy.
Excellent guy. And they all say that one of the things they really like about him is even when he was the official GM of the Flyers, he's one of those guys who doesn't pretend to have the answers. And so if you go to Holmgren and if you're trying to like sign your player, or negotiate with your player, or try to maybe get your player traded to the Flyers or whatever, you're an agent. Holmgren won't be what a lot of other GMs do, which is say, I know what's going on. Oh yeah, that's this is this. If Holmgren doesn't know really what's going on, he's one of those guys who'll tell you, listen, I don't know what's going on, but I will find out and I will get back to you on that. And people respect that because he's not just BSing them. So these press conferences are hard for Homer because knowing that when you see him talk, because he's in a situation where you kind of have to know exactly everything that's happening. And when Dave Scott's next to him, that adds another level to that. And one of the more interesting moments was Morgani asked the question, and he said, and everybody, Morgani's a big local guy here. He was on ESPN hockey for years.
Yeah.
He asked the question.
That was 20 years ago. Let's be real about that.
20 years ago, but people remember him. I mean, he was good.
Sure.
I grew up reading him in the Inquirer, right? So, and I interned with him for a while, and he's a really good guy. So he said, I'm trying to read between the lines here. He says, but because one of the things Homer brought out really right away was that Hextall was unyielding with his direction of the team, and he said to his credit, he was unyielding, and that because that is what he does. And then someone brought up, well, you were more of an aggressive GM. He's more of a patient GM. And you can see Homer's eyes kind of light up there. He's like, yeah, that's really accurate. It's an accurate thing to say. Now, remember, Homer was aggressive in the era of Ed Snyder, which is a different thing.
Right.
So he was aggressive, but I always felt like Clarke was actually aggressive as a GM. Homer was aggressive because Snyder wanted to be aggressive as a GM. And Hextall's been opposite of all of that. He's been the most patient GM. So Morgani says, trying to read between the lines here, is it safe to say that Holmgren that Hextall was in love with his prospects so much to the point where he wouldn't ever consider trading them if an opportunity arose. And remember, I'm watching this person. This question is directed to Paul Holmgren, so I'm looking at Dave Scott.
Yeah.
And so Dave Scott looks at him, goes like this, looks back at Holmgren, he goes, like that, just a little bit, to the point where you could sit there and say, okay, that hit some chord with something that Hextall and Holmgren and Scott have discussed before.
Sure.
And you can see it clearly, as clear as day. And I really do think that there's obvious. What was amazing through this whole process is how little Hextall let anyone in on what was happening. And they just let him go with it. The Flyers really.
But they let him go with it to the point where he has either the best or the second best farm system in hockey.
Yeah.
When he started,
out of salary cap hell.
Right.
Right.
And when he started, it was the worst.
But can I bring up? And he has done an unbelievable job, and I think he will get another job. I do.
Well, there's no question he will.
But here's the thing now.
In Edmonton.
There are GMs. I mean, I've heard this said about coaches. Okay, there are some coaches that are great practice coaches and not great game day coaches, right? They're great. They run great practices.
Right.
They run great drills. But when it comes to actually game day decisions in the middle of the game, they tend to make bad decisions, or they'll panic in certain situations. Is there such a thing as a great game day GM, or is not? And I kind of think that that's where they were going with this, because
I think
absolutely there is.
There is, but I think you're trying to find a GM who has a balance between real time, right now, and the future, where they draft well, they develop well, they don't rush their prospects, but they also take care of the here and the now. Now, I think Hextall should get an A+ when it comes to the future, because they've stockpiled that organization with a lot of great prospects. He's done well drafting. But the here and the now, and, Holmgren said it during the press conference about the goaltending, them going out looking for a short-term stopgap situation because their goaltending is a problem right now. That's at the feet of Ron Hextall, because at the end of last year, he doesn't go out. Neuwirth was hurt. Elliott was hurt and inconsistent. Alex Lyon had a good year in the AHL.
But it was also at the feet of Paul Holmgren.
True.
Look, hold on.
But these goalies who had hip surgery in the offseason.
Here's the problem with the Flyers organization. You can't take the two guys who led you to this point where you had to bring in an outside person, even though he's Flyers alumni, to fix it, and still have them around in the organization. You can't do that.
It's a hard spot to be in.
It's a hard spot to be in. Then you have one of the more active, and Eck and Russ, you would know this more than I would, but active owners in the NHL, Ed Snyder, who had loved that team with a passion, maybe more so than any other owner in the NHL, loved it and was involved. His health deteriorates and stuff. You get a void. Hextall could, of course, run with this because they're trying to fill the void of who everyone was eventually going to appoint to. No one told him not to do it, I bet. And this is where they arrive at. And now they're like,
that's a great point.
That's exactly true.
That's a great point, because otherwise they could have just ousted him earlier if they felt like he was going too far. What it really boiled down to were the three things I brought up yesterday. Eck, you weren't on the show, but I'll bring them up again. Empty seats, the 76ers doing well with their perceived rebuild, even though you only have to rebuild 12 players on a basketball team, and it's a lot easier. And then the lack of trades this last few days. But the idea is, if you go out and look at the trades, really look at the trades that were made, the three trades that were made, they're all net sum trades, or trades where I'm trading guys who I'm not even sure about anymore for someone who, we think could be really good here. They were not rock solid trades.
They were trading players who were doing nothing in either position, right?
Or money in, money out deals with the amounts were basically the same.
And
dealing with the salary cap,
right? Possibly
dealing with the inherited problems.
Yes, Dylan Strome with DeBrincat. That whole concept was I liked. We didn't get to talk about it yesterday, but that I like when they bring guys back together who had chemistry somewhere. That is a good thing. I always think it always works.
Sure.
But I think those three things are accurate, Russ. I do. I really think that they are accurate. The Sixers play a big part of this. They always
throw in one other thing: the Eagles winning the Super Bowl.
The Eagles play a part of it too. There's competition between the Flyers are. The Flyers have become third on the totem pole, and they've passed the Sixers in the last decade or so. But the Sixers for a long time there the Flyers were fourth, for a while there. But at times the Flyers can even jump past the Phillies. They can jump into second too, but no one's going to touch the Eagles, right? So the Eagles are up there. That's where they are.
But if the Phillies sign Bryce Harper, which is very possible, then they could be fourth again because the 76ers are could come out of the East in the NBA. The Eagles have won the Super Bowl. The Phillies will have brought one of the biggest stars in Major League Baseball to town, and the Flyers are sort of wallowing right now. And this is the thing, Eck, and Russ touched on it, and we touched on it yesterday. Hextall did a great job stockpiling this organization, similar to, say, Gene Michael back in the 90s when Steinbrenner was out of New York. He was able to draft Jeter and Bernie Williams and all these guys and bring them into New York. And then once Michael was out of there, he was still in the organization, but once he was out as GM, they had the benefits of this young core going forward, and it propelled them to 4 World Series in 5 years.
Yeah.
The problem is who do they hire? And what does that GM do with that young core? Based on what we saw today and the emphasis on being aggressive, I'm scared for that core, that young core, for those prospects, because they're going to use them as fodder to acquire players that are right now players. And that is disastrous if they do that. It really is.
It depends. I mean, you can move some of them. Okay, there are some. I mean, the Flyers have such a good stockpile. Like, that's why I brought up Travis Sanheim's name. Okay, so many times, because they can move Travis Sanheim, and that's a hell of a player to be able to move. But when you've got Gostisbehere and Provorov already, and Robert Hagg, who's a much better, and there's other guys coming too that are really, Sanheim is a talented guy who could be a top 4 defenseman in the league. Mm-hmm. But you can move him. And I get the impression, I will tell you something today, a side thing, I think they were in on Nylander, and I think that I really do, because when I was talking to people just around there, I got the impression that Nylander,
there may still be something there, X. So we'll talk about that after.
I also, not to have a Nylander drinking moment, but I just thought that was interesting. And I also think that they are, the other thing that's really interesting is Homer went out of his way all the time to say this had nothing to do with Hextall not wanting to fire Hextall. That was.
Well, you know what? I believe him.
No, and Holmgren is honest. The one thing I will say,
Matt, he is honest, and I do believe him. I kept telling people this is multi-layered, multifaceted. It has a lot less to do about Dave Hextall and a lot more to do about a lot of other things. But you have to admit this: of those other things, there could have been a situation, and we don't know, if they wanted to keep some other coaches and maybe fire Dave Hextall, and maybe Ron said no because this isn't good, that's not good, I don't agree with that. At some point, they became to a point of disagreement, and that's when things started probably taking a turn. And it may not have happened yesterday. It probably started to happen in the last week or two when I had mentioned to you guys that Dave Scott started to be in the booth.
Right.
Yeah.
With the guy, to watch games.
We haven't seen him very much at all over the many years,
never at all.
I mean, there were most people up there didn't even know who he was.
I still didn't, other than just a little quick.
Yeah, that's the guy. Like, you would see his successor, who was Peter Luukko. You would all the time was that.
Oh, he would talk to us, greet us. He would be there every day.
I mean, and Peter Luukko, only left Florida because only left for Florida, which area has the whole same job now, because Peter Luukko was the heir apparent that was going to be the guy who was going to take over Ed Snyder. That was the whole plan. But Ed Snyder, at that when Peter left, was just healthy as could be and looked like he was going to live till he was 150.
Remember, Pat Croce was supposed to take over for Ed Snyder too, and it didn't work out for him either. Like, there's a long history of that not working out in Philadelphia for the Sixers and for the Flyers when they both were owned by the same corporation.
Right.
Well, firing Hextall it was not a quid pro quo in terms of Hextall, either do this or you get fired, but the end result is going to be the same, because with a new general manager coming outside of the organization, the clock is ticking on Hextall. He has another losing streak. It shows that they're not doing anything. The first thing the new GM is going to say is, I want to have my own guy.
Well, in the press conference, that's the question I asked. I don't know if you saw it or not, but that's what I asked. I came right out and said to him, I said, listen, there has to be a timeline on this, because you've obviously put Hextall into a really uncomfortable situation here. by saying the next GM gets to pick it. And GM hunts can take months, So what's the timeline on this? And and Homer said, there's no real timeline. We got to get this right. But then Dave Scott jumped in and said, no, we're talking weeks, not months. And that's what he said.
And that's where, when I saw that quote, there were two things that worried me in this press conference. That quote and the quote where Paul Holmgren said we might see Carter Hart this year. And if you're seeing Carter Hart for one game just to evaluate him, that's fine. The way he was talking about Hart was in those terms. He said, "Do we think we want to just see what he's got and bring him up for a little bit?" That's what he literally said.
Give him a taste. That's fine.
And he said, and I think
that will not be the case when he comes up, because here's the problem.
That is the problem. You're right.
You are bringing up a kid who, once he comes up, the fans look at as a savior, and no kid should be put under that kind of pressure.
And not in this situation.
No, right. And that's exactly it, Peter.
This is the worst situation.
I've been a proponent of Hart getting some time up here as well, but not anymore, because
the worst case scenario is if he comes up, say late in the season, and they're out of the playoff race, and he comes up and he looks good, and he plays good for 4 or 5 games, then they're gonna say, we got our goalie, we're ready. He's 20, he'll be 21 years old. We're gonna go with him, and we'll just get a veteran backup. You don't do that. Especially with goaltenders. You do not. Carey Price won a Calder Cup in the AHL. You need development time for goaltenders. You don't rush them. If you do that, it's going to end up being Steve Penny or guys like that who were rushed, who came up, were a flash in the pan, and then sucked the rest of their career.
I'm going to give you
you either find someone who's got a basket full of them that are NHL ready, a la Anaheim, and getting Freddie Anderson, or you take your damn time and do it. I want to throw out another little theory here about when you went back and said this is going to take a few weeks and why this may have happened. Certainly there's some, I take Paul Holmgren at his word, philosophical difference and stuff, but you can work understanding the philosophy, and you can change the philosophy if you're the boss. But let's look at around the NHL. Peter Chiarelli must be sweating bullets right now. Who else is a potential GM? I wonder if Armstrong in St. Louis is feeling a little bit of heat.
Yeah.
Where are some other places? So the reason you do this, maybe Stan Bowman is a little, right? So you think about this. You do this because you want the first shot at hiring the replacement before there's competition. That's why you do this now. The one thing, and another point I wanted to make, just you talked about assets and where Hextall had gotten the team in terms of prospect pool development stuff. This is a huge issue for the Winnipeg Jets when they moved back from Atlanta. A lot of people, and I was critical of it too at times, wanted them to start making deals, because if you're going to reset, really reset. And Chevy didn't. He held on to guys like Wheeler and Little, and he eventually got rid of Kane, but he held on to Ladd. He tried to extend him, but he got him to a 5-year deal right off the top. They re-signed these guys rather than trading them and really doing a reset. Well, the Flyers sort of never really reset. They just kept sort of forging away, had to deal with bad contracts. Mm-hmm. So the thing that one of the TSN guys has always said, and Mike will probably know him from the Toronto area, his name's Rick Ralph.
Yep.
Rick always said on the radio, he goes, to make deals, you need picks and you need prospects.
Right.
You can't do it without.
Yep.
The Flyers are at that point where they can start making deals because they have picks and they have prospects.
Okay, but here's the funny thing, Peter. And then I'll let you continue. So the guy who I do my show with, Shane Malloy, the one thing he told me first was the Flyers should be following the Winnipeg model. And if you remember, a couple of years ago, everybody wanted to kill Chevy. Everybody.
Yep.
Right.
And he stood pat. Yep. He let his guys develop.
Yep.
He took the heat, and there was all kinds of heat in your market on the radio, like there is.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Huge heat. Took it all, but where are they now?
Yeah. They kept Roslovic. They kept Connor. They kept
and when it was time to spend, they traded Eric Foley, which was a major pick, a major guy who people saw. Unfortunately, Eric Foley hasn't played a game this year because of a concussion injury. Yeah. That's really sad. But they spent money. When it was 2015, they got guys like Stepniak and Toulouse, and they did things when the time was right. But the thing about when you hit that point is you have to know when that point is. And I think the Flyers, if it's not right now, it's really close.
I think
maybe that's where those philosophical difference hit. Not that Hextall didn't want to, but when he wanted to.
The difference between Chevy and Hexy, I think I think this fine tunes. It's a great comparison because I think this fine tunes what's actually.
Thank Shane because I didn't do it.
Yeah, but I think what's actually going on here is dead on right. If we can take Homer for his word, and this isn't about firing Hextall, which I'm telling you, Homer is as honest as a day is long. The guy is incapable of lying. Okay, and I've seen him. He will, when you see these long silences from Homer.
Oh no, I agree with you on that.
He does not lie. Okay, and there are GMs all throughout the league that I can tell you maybe 2 others in the league that don't lie, but Homer is one of them. I mean, he's not a GM anymore, but as a GM, when I dealt with him more as a GM than I do now, of course, but he did not lie. He would not lie. He would not reply to you, but he would never lie. Other GMs will lie. So if you take him for his word that it's not Hextall, okay, then you listen to Dave Scott saying things like, well, we and then you also see him say, both of them say Hextall was unyielding in his plan. And then Homer, when asked about it Chris Moore is like, Hextall kept everything close to the vest, meaning that, and we're all sitting there saying, well, we know that because he never talks to anybody. I haven't gotten a Flyer scoop in years. But
there is a misnomer.
Homer shouldn't think that. Homer needs to know what the hell's going on. So the difference
that alleviates him of responsibility act. That's what it does.
No, Homer doesn't do that. So
I'm just saying by saying that it does.
I get that, but when I look at Scott, the way I see this going down, and this is total speculation, but the difference between Chevy and Hextall is Mark Chapman, right? Chapman, who owns the Winnipeg Jets, has always known what Chevy's doing. Okay, Chevy's been very clear with the owner of the Jets about the rebuild and how it's going on, and I don't get the impression that Hextall was as clear. And I think this is a communication issue.
No, but I go back to what Peter said. All they had to do was say, hey, a year ago, we need to sit down. We are having problems.
You don't think they tried that? I can't.
I don't know about that. I can't say for sure they did.
I can't imagine. I mean, if you're in that situation, running a team like this, I mean, Holmgren has to say that. I mean, Homer tries everything. The way it sounds like is Homer could not get through to Hextall.
Understand this, though. When Paul Holmgren took that position, he took it, and I was at the press conference, he took the position of president to work on the business side of hockey. Right. That's what he talked about. If you remember, that was the goal. And what I tweeted this morning was, hockey operations and marketing are 2 different jobs, right? So the 2 things the Flyers didn't do this offseason were market their players. They could have marketed Konechny, Giroux, and Voracek, Provorov, and Sanheim, put them on a poster, and market the hell out of them that this is what you have to look forward to for the next 5-6 years still. This is our team, the heart of our team. Instead, they created gritty. That's what they did.
Now, Eck, and
they also seriously hampered Voracek and Giroux, okay, which has been a problem. That's been an issue. And I mean, and everybody can sit back and say that Hextall's great moment was putting Couturier at center. That happened by mistake to start with.
It did happen by mistake, but that's sometimes
it worked, and that's fine.
I just learned the other day, peanut butter and jelly probably happened by mistake too.
Right. Reese's peanut butter cups. We all know that happened by mistakes. So let's, but that was like you got my Couturier and your Giroux, and you got your Giroux and my Couturier. That's what happened there. It was a complete and utter disaster. Disaster that worked out perfectly well because no one wanted to take center away from Claude Giroux. That was not a thought at all. I mean, Claude Giroux is one of the best face-off guys in the league, and a completely crazy, So the fact that worked great, but I can't help but think because I'm sitting there, and you're right, Russ. You're so right that Holmgren wanted to do business. That's what he wanted to do when he left, and I'm talking about it too. And yet, you can see that Scott has mentored Homer in that. Like you can see that Dave Scott has mentored Homer, and you can see the relationship when you're talking to each other. You can get that sense of like this guy who like. But he also knows Homer knows hockey better than he does.
Right, but I think they dragged him back over to the hockey side.
Well, they needed to because who else was there? I mean,
I saw them. Remember, you weren't here yesterday, but I did tell the audience and Mike that I saw Paul Holmgren huddled up with Bobby Clarke after a game. So clearly they were getting Bobby Clarke's opinion, and he has been to more games recently than he has been to in the last 6 months as well.
Let's just say this: we're not going to know what the direction is of this franchise until they hire the new GM and until things play out before the trade deadline.
But there's one more thing about that, Mike. Sorry, the trade deadline. Dave Scott.
Yeah,
and this was really strange because this is not something that you ever hear. I've never. I mean, obviously, I listen for this all the time.
Sure.
He says, "What are you excited about?" You know, because Howard Eskin, who is kind of like a legendary clown type disc jockey in the city, for those who don't know him, asked the question. Shouldn't you change the coach? I mean, if you talk about what's wrong with the team right now on the ice, you should be changing the coach, right? I mean, and that's a question everybody should ask. And Dave Scott says, no, we also think the GM has to do it right now. And we're really looking forward to the trade deadline because we see great opportunities there that we don't want to miss out on.
I'm sorry. That's an inexperienced
right.
Answer. That basically tells you, it says, we're open for sale, folks. Let's go. And that's just stupid.
But what
it really is stupid.
It also sounds like and Peter, back me up on this, a business talking point in getting away from Hextall. Like it feels like, okay, we're not going to talk about Hextall because someone's if they're smart, and they are, because Dave Scott's a really smart guy. He's going to sit there and say, someone's going to ask you about Hextall. What are we going to say? And we're like, well, we can always say we want a new GM in because we're looking forward to the trade deadline. Like that to me is how this went. I mean,
I agree. There's a lot of moving parts here, and there's a lot of variables. Holmgren, I just catching up now, sort of looking at my Twitter feed. Some of the things he said about maybe looking for a short-term goalie fix until the new GM's here. I mean, a lot of things are coming out on this. Which
means
I think if you had to summarize it,
Holmgren is the interim GM, by the way.
He is the interim GM. If you had to summarize it, this is a move to start making action because the status quo was no longer acceptable. You can figure out, speculating why it wasn't acceptable. We can do that all day. But the ownership and upper management decided the status quo wasn't good enough. And their decision was based on the fact that Hexie had a way. They want to do a different way because this doesn't work anymore. And that's where we're at. And it'll be interesting to see. It's going to give us tons to talk about. Yes. And I would expect not only would we see trades and signings, I think we're going to maybe see some interesting shakeups as well, and dynamics on the team.
There's nothing settled. I can't give you any insight into who the next guy is. I can't give you any insight into how long Dave Hextall will be coaching. There's no insight for any of that.
I can give you a little bit of it, but just from today, just from talking to people. Okay, so first of all, I get he was asked about Dean Lombardi, and we can get into that discussion too. But and he said no, and I was surprised he directly responded to this because this was in the scrum after the press conference, so you wouldn't have seen it on TV. And he said, I think Sam Carchidi asked, "Is it safe to say that Lombardi is a candidate?" Right? And he says no. Holmgren says no, but it's kind of like, whoa, he's like, no, I talked to Dean, and I doesn't have any desire to be a GM again.
And there was a comment, I think it was John Shannon. Oh no, Pierre LeBrun said the reason that Lombardi would not take the job is because of his close relationship with Hextall.
Yep. Oh man. I would guess.
Well, Hextall. I mean, he hired Hextall. He hired Hextall in Los Angeles, and Hextall brought him in.
That is definitely going to be the line, but I just. Yeah, we'll just leave it there. I think there's more to it than that. I think that Lombardi doesn't want the pressure. I'll just say this: does not want the pressure of Philadelphia. He wasn't great with the pressure in LA, even though he won Stanley Cups. It psychologically killed him. Like I talked to people who said that he was always worried about his job, and there's no question that Philadelphia makes LA look like a walk in the park. Like Philadelphia is a much higher intensity job. It does sound like that they're going outside the organization. Like when people, which is good for the Flyers, because the Flyers generally, like Dave Poulin's name came up, Chris Pronger's name came up, even Danny Briere's name came up today to people. Briere is the GM. Briere is the GM of the
But he's been a GM for 2 weeks. You can't bring him down.
I know. There's no way. Obviously, I mean, I jokingly texted Briere, "So are you the next GM?"
And he would say the same thing, by the way.
Yeah, no, he would say the same. He was like, I'm not quite ready for that. That's his response. Yeah. But no, so this whole thing is, but those are you Poulin, right? Dave Poulin. He has been a GM,
I mean, The association between him and the Flyers makes sense, but he's a commentator on TSN after being let go as an assistant GM in Toronto. I mean, I'm sure he'd be
He's
flattered.
a smart guy. There's no
Smart
question.
guy, definitely.
Most commentators would rather be GMs. Okay, not
But
all.
here's the thing: they did that in baseball. No offense to Dave.
Yeah.
They did it in baseball where Larry Durker went down from he was in the broadcast booth. They brought him down and made him manager, and it was horrible.
Yeah, it doesn't. But look at in other situations like Burke has gone back and forth. Burke has been.
But Burke is a different animal, and to be honest, it wasn't all successful the last couple of times.
But he did also win a Stanley Cup, right? So I mean, there's different things there.
Sure.
Yeah, I honestly think Burke is very happy with his role at Sportsnet.
Yeah, he does.
Finally got his hair the way he wants it. Leave him
He sees himself.
Shaved on the side, long on the top.
I think Burke
beautiful
definitely
thing.
sees himself as the next Don Cherry. He'll be the coach's corner guy when Don leaves. But Burke. The interesting thing is this, though. Holmgren and Burke are incredibly close.
Right.
And there's no question that Burke.
How about Dave Nonis?
Burke will be consulted in this. He's one of Homer's guys. Homer will talk to Burke.
You want to know something, though? Here's the thing, though, and you'll agree with me on this, Zach. If Brian Burke is brought in, Gritty's gone.
Yeah.
I don't
Oh
think.
yeah, well that's
Got rid of the
deal
brass
stopper.
bonanza. Get rid of that friggin' joke of a mascot.
I don't agree with that. I don't think.
Oh no, he would not take the job. I actually would go on a ledge here and say Ron Hextall probably was not happy with Gritty either.
I think
Heck, Brian Burke.
to say that Gritty is untouchable.
Brian Burke came out and ripped the Flyers organization for the fact that I think it was in Buffalo on Friday was the first fight that they had
Right.
for the entire season, and he tore a piece out of them for basically letting the side down of the tradition of the organization to be so not aggressive.
When you said that, my post was you could have Gritty, but you can't make the players gritty unless the coach wants you to play that way.
Right.
And the coach does not want them to play that way.
Right.
That is the problem with the coach, along with a lot of other things.
Yeah.
And that's something Ron Hextall couldn't control. He couldn't control Dave. He even said it a million times, Hextall. He is not going to tell the coach what players to play and how to play them.
And Holmgren's not going to tell Hextall what to do. That's what's happening here. This
Right.
situation was the typical hockey thing of kindness and politeness.
Heck, did you not think it was weird? Terrell Goulbourne, a known agitator, played 2 games. He's got a little bit of hockey skill, but very little. But he could play. He could skate. He played 2 full games. He didn't even have a penalty.
No, you're right. Well, I ask you this. Somebody brought this up today, and I think this is true. Hextall coached where in college? How many fights are there in college?
Oh, no, there's none because you get ejected.
Right. So, I mean, in Hextall's MO, is there anything about that? You know what I mean? Like, there's –
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm not. That's maybe selling Hextall a little bit short because obviously he's a hockey person. But at the same time, he comes from a place where there's no fighting at all. Now, I will give you an exclusive podcast rumor, okay? Because I'm not sure if I'll put this up yet or not. I have to do some more research on this. But there's a name that came up when talking about Flyers short-term goalies today, with a couple people I was talking to down there.
Peter Mrazek.
No, definitely not Peter Mrazek. No, Peter Mrazek will have to I don't even know. If
I know who the name's going to be. Go ahead. You say.
Give me your thought.
No, it's going to – here's the thing. Okay, so if we're going to talk about getting Bobrovsky here and signing him to anything less than a 6-year deal, that's crazy because he's only going to want a 6-year deal. And they had Bobrovsky once before, and I think the guy right now who was leading the press conference traded him.
Yes, he did.
Jacob Voracek for Sergei Bobrovsky. No.
Yeah, no.
You know what I'm saying? Like, this is –
not the name. It's not Bobrovsky.
okay.
Well, there's only one team right now that's got a goaltending situation where they have an extra goaltender that they probably want to get rid of, and that's Carolina. So I'd say it's Curtis McElhinney.
No, incorrect again. Who do you think it is?
All right, so
One more.
I don't know.
Yes, it's a Western Conference goalie. I'll give you that.
Cam Talbot.
Nope. It's a lot more surprising than that.
Markstrom.
Nope.
A lot more surprise. Jake Allen.
Nope. That would be really surprising. It's not as surprising as Jake Allen.
Corey Crawford.
Jonathan Quick. All right, now
He's injured.
you stop it.
He's injured. He's got a torn meniscus.
Listen. First of all, he's playing this week. Okay, he's back. He's been in the safe game of the team. He's healthy.
And the next week after that, he'll be injured again.
He's healthy. I know. And bringing in another injury-prone goalie is the last thing.
Come on.
And I'm not saying it's going to happen right now, but if Quick were to get going here, okay, and play some games, the Kings are thrilled with the kid they brought up, right? Who's
Cal Peterson, yes, as Russ said.
Short term, they're thrilled with him. Yes.
Well, and he's their goalie of the future, right? He's their guy.
Yes. Yeah, there's no question, but it might not be right now.
Well, there might not be a right now for the Kings, you know.
Well, okay, let's just say this. It goes along with what we thought the Kings were starting to do with the Tanner Pearson deal.
Right.
If they move Quick, but Quick has to prove that he's healthy,
right?
meaning playing a long stretch. But
this would be a disaster. A disaster.
Yeah. Yes.
To give up assets for Jonathan Quick would be a disaster.
Yes.
Yeah. It could be, but at the same time, if Quick stays healthy, he's also a game changer. And if he's also a game changer for maybe the next 2 years, which
I don't know if he's a game changer anymore. I can't go with that anymore.
I mean, yeah, he was last year.
It's been a while since he's been a game changer. 2 years ago, he still had like one more showing in him. Now I'm not sure.
But is he good? Is he better than? He's better than
everybody's better than them, but that's not the argument. The argument is
Turk Broda is better than them, and he's been dead for 40 years.
Turk Broda has a lot more shutouts than these guys.
The Flyers are finally going with Stolarz tonight, which is what they should have done a long.
Which they should have done in Toronto because they played.
But again, Stolarz hasn't played that many games since coming off of double knee surgery.
I know he missed a year, but he did look better.
He missed a year, but you want him in there.
That's where we are, man. It's like,
but it's not a good place to be. I will say this:
it's not a good place to be. But the
chat room has some good points. Like people have brought up names to me today, like Chris Pronger and now Steve Greeley. The only thing I could say is you can go to a team. I found out even in season if you're an assistant and it's in your deal. But sometimes the team doesn't want you to go, right? And they say, we won't allow it until, the end of the year. That does happen. So there's not 100% guarantee. For me, and this is just me saying this, I don't think Chris Pronger has enough experience. Now, Steve Greeley went from the Rangers to the Sabres, has done really well. I've chatted with Steve Greeley a lot. I think he's a very smart guy. I think he would do a good job. I don't know if Buffalo's giving him up right now.
No, I don't think – I mean, the other thing that you have to be careful about, like I've talked to people, like I know a couple GMs that have assistant GMs, like Botterill when he was an assistant GM, Zito who's an assistant GM in Columbus.
Botterill stayed, and no, he left in season. He did, right?
No, but what I'm saying about some assistant GMs, like Zito in Columbus, I know has this case as well because of following with Minnesota and Buffalo Burke before. A lot of assistant GMs get in their contract that you don't have to ask permission to talk to them. That actually is a common assistant GM contract thing, which I never knew about before.
Okay.
But there are several of them that have that. I don't know. The guy in Buffalo was thrown out there by Saravelli, and
Greeley.
Yeah, Greeley was thrown out by Saravelli. I'm not buying that.
The name I heard, and I mentioned it in our group text. Somebody mentioned it yesterday up in Toronto was Craig Conroy, the assistant GM of the Flames, and he's got a good reputation. But again, that might go ahead.
Like I said, Zito Columbus is a good name. He's got a long run. Remember, Zito is the guy who now is the GM of the U.S. team when they went to the World Championships. It's probably going to be the U.S. So remember, Holmgren is all tied into that U.S. team. So there's a connection between them there.
Well. Go ahead, Russ.
I will say this, and then we should move on. Conroy is another guy who's been on my show for a couple of years, and he is really engaging, and he's very smart, and he knows the organization. He knows how to develop players. He can see the path. He's only been in that position for 2 years, I think.
The thing I like about Zito over him, and
Zito's been in it a lot longer. Right?
He worked in player development for the Flames since he retired too, Russ. Like he's been in that organization for
but he hasn't been in the management part of it.
Yeah,
right.
Bill Zito is one of the only guys, assistant GMs out there right now, who was actually a really successful player agent for a while, and that aspect of the business is enormous. Like, and that's something that you can't diminish the fact that some of these guys who were players and then become assistant GMs have never dealt with like contract negotiations to the point of like a Bill Zito.
And he has Flyer ties, correct? So,
so I mean, Kimmo Timonen, who was still was his player, and Kimmo's very much involved with the Flyers still. So. There's no question that he'll get an interview here, and and there'll be interviews with a lot of different people here. And I actually think I heard they're going to bring in Jeff Fletcher for an interview. I heard that too.
to me, I'm going to tell you something. If you want to turn back the clock to a bad time in hockey deals, salary cap, bring in Chuck Fletcher.
Well, that's hilarious.
That's kind of what I brought up yesterday in my thing. And, Mark Hunter's name, too, came up. Yesterday I brought up the whole fact of, and I put old school versus new school GMs. And I saw about the, like where you.
That's Paul Fenton, who's digging out of salary cap hell now.
Yeah, right. Chuck Fletcher, Lombardi, who we said old school GMs, Zito, Hunter, new school GMs. But the point is that Hunter and Zito are actually both older than Fletcher or Lombardi. I found out.
Yeah, Hunter is not a new school GM.
But something about Hunter. Here's the thing about Hunter.
Young, but see, that's that. I should have been clearer in my thing. I'm not saying these guys are young. I'm saying that their philosophies are new.
But Hunter wasn't really a full-fledged GM. He still worked side by side with other people, almost at the same level.
And Hunter was.
But he wasn't a full-fledged GM.
And Hunter was an assistant GM. Draft side of things. He was there for the prospects. They don't need that anymore.
Right. Hunter was an assistant.
Take them to the next level.
Right. Hunter was an assistant GM in title, but he was director of player personnel. So basically, if you needed somebody to be, the draft guru and a scout and somebody who loves that part of the job, then he's the guy. But that's not the GM's job. Is to delegate and make decisions. And I don't, and he can do that, but he has no experience at the NHL level.
The elephant in the room on this one is, I hope the Flyers interview Chris Pryor for the job, because he has been the assistant GM. He has been part of this whole reemergence of the farm system, but we don't hear his name at all, so I'm worried about that.
They said today that they were expecting to go outside the organization, so that
Chris Pryor is not going to get a shot at it.
I think you're right that he deserves a shot at it. I mean, I think Chris Pryor is a great guy, and I think he's actually
he knows about the salary cap, and he knows he's a new school guy. He is.
I think what you really need is a combination of somebody who can handle the salary cap, who can be good and young. Everyone's looking at Toronto with a young GM, Arizona with a young GM. Everybody's looking at that right now.
Yeah, that's a real big success.
You would be a young GM. You look good today, I got to tell you.
Thanks, so do you.
Yeah, that trade that Jacob made was really great. All right,
we can move on, but we'll move on. But I think that I think this is going to be. The quote was, my question was, it's going to be weeks, not months. I think it's going to be days, not weeks. I honestly have a feeling because they really can't keep Hextall going like this for very long. And
I disagree. I mean, I've seen situations where coaches, quote unquote, being hung out to dry have lasted way longer than
firing the GM. Really says this is a roster issue, not a coaching issue, is the first issue. We think the roster can be better. The coach can't make the roster change. The GM can. We got to move on.
I'm sorry, one more thing. This is obviously big news today, and this is we have a huge Philadelphia following on our site. So I'm just going to finish with this thought here. And I know. I try to not make this Flyer buzz as much as I can. But Hextall, when asked about, I hate all these H names. Holmgren, when asked about Hextall, said very clearly, coaching in the NHL is hard. That was an interesting quote from Holmgren because, remember, this is a college coach, and the big take on, is like coaching in the NHL is hard. I feel like, given all the injuries, he's done a decent job. That's not a glowing endorsement from Hextall at all. But he did say, when someone asked, do you think the new GM will look at Hextall? Homer says, I really hope so. I really think he deserves to be looked at based on his work. I thought last year he had 90-some points, 98 points, and we were on the right direction. This year, obviously, we're not. So
I think the most dangerous thing, and just to finish this off, the most dangerous thing is that the Flyers are 5 points out of a wild card and 6 points out of third place in the division, and that may convince the hierarchy that they need to make a move or two to get back in the race, and I think that's delusional.
And absolutely final thought, and I promise this final thought. Is it possible that this has something to do with Joel Quenneville? And my instinct,
of course, it's possible.
Telling me that because the Flyers and Comcast and Ed Snyder have this history of going out if the best kind of person becomes available, of grabbing him. Like Comcast does this when they hire people all the time. For Quenneville to be available and sitting out there like this, right? And he did turn down. We found out finally why he turned down Edmonton. He did turn down Edmonton. Did you hear that story?
No.
Yeah, well, I'll go to that in a second. But He turned down. Well, I'll say right now, he turned down Edmonton because Chiarelli could only offer him a 1-year deal. How about that?
Because Chiarelli's on
because he's on a short leash. That's the problem.
Chiarelli's on, and Quenneville's like, no, I can't. I'm not going to take a 1-year deal. So, but they did go to him first. The only person Hitchcock was, of course, willing. Hitchcock only does 1-year deals, so it worked out perfectly. But so this. But if they're sitting there saying we cannot let, they're watching coaches get fired and Quenneville not get hired, and they're going to Hextall and saying, we have to look at Quenneville and they're not getting any response. This, I wonder about this. I wonder if we could actually see Quenneville hired before a new GM. And
I don't honestly, I don't think so. I don't think he would take the job unless
I don't think he would take the job.
Right. Exactly. If they go out and hire Ron Francis, who he played with in Hartford, knows that
Babcock hired before a new GM.
That's Babcock. That's different.
Not much.
It's really different because Quenneville, Babcock has the kind of contract that he knows there's 100% complete authoritarianism and safety especially with a GM with no experience as a GM, as a full-fledged GM.
Babcock has autonomy on the 23-man roster. He makes the decisions.
Right. They're not giving autonomy to Joel Quenneville. Now, he may ask for it, but they're not going to give it to him without knowing who the GM is, because then no GM will take the job.
All right. Let me look, because you mentioned
move on. Sorry.
You mentioned this earlier in connection with the Flyers and saying I have a feeling that they were in on Nylander. I have a feeling the Nylander situation is not over yet, because a lot of people are saying, it's closing in on the 6-year deal or a bridge deal. And Nick Kyprios mentioned yesterday, and this is I think sort of very interesting, that there has been no talk between Nylander and the Leafs over the last 3 days. If that is the case, then I think this is going south. Because it's either they've agreed to a deal and they're waiting for a couple more days to improve the whole cap situation, like Cap Friendly has pointed out. The front loading of the first year, the spreading out of the cap hit over the remaining years of the deal. There's a benefit to the Leafs. There's a benefit to Nylander. Okay, it also could be the fact that there, as you mentioned, there's a difference in terms of them with signing bonus, and if it's signing bonus, the Leafs are not going to reward a player for basically holding out for 2 months and then saying, okay, pay me all the money that you were supposed to pay me. Because, well, for one, I think it's a bad precedent to set. For two, it does not enable them to use that CBA thing to be able to front load. It won't give them that flexibility. And that flexibility is, I think, the only reason why they're signing him to a long-term deal. I believe that Nylander eventually, if he signs this deal, will be traded. It's because you can get more for him with cost certainty on a long-term deal than you can on a bridge deal or with him, staying in the KHL after December 1st.
Yes. No, I think that it's important that we moved on from the Flyers to get to Nylander. And so
are you kidding me?
I know people out there are thinking it though. But no, these are the two big stories. You can't get around it. It's like, so Nylander's deadline is December 1st, and that's the reality.
Yeah, it'll be over with after December 1st.
Until next week, we will talk Nylander. So of course, once they sign him, and then like you said, they're going to sign him and want to trade him. So then we will continue talking Nylander, but that'll only go to the deadline, promise, until of course the summer, at which point we'll talk about him getting traded at the draft. But before that, there will be 3 months in the middle where we will not talk about him between the trade deadline.
We will be talking about him because he's going to join some other team, and there's going to be updates from that.
Right.
Well, if he does, but if he stays with the Leafs, there's going to be between the trade deadline and say June 15th, we won't talk about Nylander at all.
Right, that's true.
Unless of course he scores goals.
Or he gets injured. Yeah.
All right. So anyway. Yeah, I think that
Mr. Sunshine. Thank you, Russ.
No, I wrote about it yesterday, and I can't stress enough that the signing bonus is the issue. That I've been talking to people, and it's pretty basic, because the idea here is, Nylander, say he wants, if the difference is $500,000, which you've said it is, Mike, and you think that's where it is. I think it's actually closer to $1 million, not quite $1 million, but closer to $1 million. Regardless, it's a difference, and if that difference is the case, then you're looking at the fact that one quarter of the season is done. So whatever he signs for this year, he's only getting 3/4 of that. So if he gets, if he signs for, I don't know, $6 million, he's getting $4 million or whatever. This is what's going to happen. So he's going to. This is going to be an issue, right? So the only way to get around that is a signing bonus, right? Where he gets a signing bonus, but then but the Leafs don't want to do a signing bonus. Why? Because this sets a horrible precedent. It puts them in a situation where because everybody thinks they could be in the same exact spot next year with Mitch Marner. So that's like. Well,
I see. The thing is, I think Mitch Marner is a Toronto boy. He's represented by a local agent. He's going to hit, they recognize, he had 3 assists last night. They recognize that Marner is a better player. What's that?
Way better than Nylander, though.
Right? That I just said. He's a much better player, and there are people who love Nylander. And don't get me wrong, I think he's a really good player. I just don't think he was worth $8 million. I don't think he's worth $7 million based on what he's done in his career so far. So if they get him for basically Pasternak money, who by the way scored 2 goals yesterday against the Leafs, and they had no Bergeron, they had no Chara, and they were only in that game because Pasternak and Marchand are unstoppable, especially with the Leafs defense being as sort of mediocre as it is. Do you really need to sign Nylander, or do you need that top 4 defenseman? I will continue to say until I'm blue in the face that they need that top 4 defenseman more than they need William Nylander.
There is no question about it that they need that. Yeah, and that's they absolutely. And they know that, but the problem is everybody else knows that too. So this is so when they're taking these this is not a team that can sneak around and move a player, because this is the Toronto Maple Leafs, right? So everything is out there. Everybody knows what Nylander's about. Everybody knows the situation they're under. Everybody knows the pressure they're under.
Well, Peter, let me ask you this question.
Okay.
If they sign Nylander to a 6-year deal or a bridge deal, and we know what we did. What I just said is the case that they need a top 4 defenseman. Ron Haynes yesterday was responsible, or indirectly or directly responsible, for the 2 goals that they gave up. They need at least one, I think 2, but I think at least one top 4 defenseman. Does all of a sudden Kasperi Kapanen, who has played great in the place of William Nylander, does he become the asset that they shop? Or
I think if you get William Nylander to a reasonable bridge contract, he becomes incredibly attractive. Actually, more so.
He's on his ELC, and this is his first good year.
Right. I think what all Kapanen's done is said to Dubas is that we don't need to get William Nylander signed at any cost. Right. That's what Kapanen's given them. And so now if you can get Nylander to a bridge deal, and, I'm sure this conversation has come up in that, take a bridge, we can move you. You can work with the next team that doesn't have Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner. And they probably wouldn't have said it this way, who are going to need just as much money as you, if not more, and go from there. And you're going to earn your money, and you're going to do this. And Nylander's camp is probably sitting there going, no, it's better for you to be a Leaf, because you're going to pile up points playing with these guys, right? And it's going to increase your value no matter what. It's a double-edged sword. Right. So, but if the Leafs are going to do anything, and pray to God, and we said this yesterday, Ak, when you were there, the Leafs are a Freddie Anderson injury away from utter disaster.
Correct.
Because the way that guy is playing, he's MVP of the league right now. I don't even think there's an argument to be made.
At one point last night, the Bruins, without Bergeron, without Chara, were out shooting the Leafs 29-15, and the only reason the game was tied was Freddie Anderson.
Yeah, so, it's insane what he's doing. And the other thing that scares me for the Leafs too, though, is what if Freddie Anderson plays 72 games or something?
Yeah, he's on pace for 66.
Yeah, 66 games, and he comes in just whipped. And it's not 66 games of, it's 66 games of facing 30 shots that you save, let alone the ones that you're set for.
Prior to Saturday, the last 4 games, I believe that he faced an average of 42 shots on goal.
He is what he's doing is he's keeping the pressure off of what has been. I think I'm going to throw it out there. I mean, at the risk of getting in trouble, a horrible coaching job by Mike Babcock. I really do. I really feel
in terms of utilizing the goaltender.
And in terms of his team playing any defense, like I mean, I'm not. This is not.
Ron Hainsey is playing a top pairing minute,
right?
And Marchand and Pasternak were he was your grandfather's old Buick, and Marchand was a Corvette blowing by him all night last night.
And I can't see how the league possibly not have a better option than that.
They don't. I mean, Babcock is comfortable with a veteran guy playing with Riley because he stays back most of the time, but his speed has dramatically declined in the last 12 months. I don't think he's the same defenseman in the first half that he was in the first half of last year, and it's painfully apparent. And we know Jake Gardiner is probably going to leave via free agency next summer. So you need to go out and get somebody who has maybe a year or two left in their contract that can step in for Gardiner once Gardiner leaves. But
that's not even enough, Mike. I mean, if you're replacing Gardiner, you're just getting back to where you are now, which is horrible. So got beyond that. You've got to have Gardiner and somebody else come in too.
Well, for this year, you'll have Gardiner and that guy, and then you'll probably have to either go into free agency or make another deal to get another player, or you call up young guys from the Marlies, which I think they're going to do. But I'm saying
players on the Marlies. I mean, they do have some talent down there.
Yeah, Liljegren's a first-round pick, but he's not ready yet. The kid that they drafted this year, an 18-year-old Rasmus Sandin, has played very well in limited games, but they're a ways away. They're like the Flyers, like the Jets. They're not going to rush these guys because one, it's not beneficial long term. Two, it's not beneficial in terms of the cap because they're starting the clock on their ELCs. So they're there's going to be moves. I think they're going to have, if they sign Nylander or if they trade Nylander, they're going to have cap space at the deadline to make moves, and that should be exciting.
I do think that if none of this was happening today, a big story that we haven't talked about at all, and we'll talk about for the last couple minutes here, is the fact that Shea Weber is returning tonight, which is a huge issue. The Canadians, I mean, Shea Weber's been out for 49 weeks. Okay, so that's almost a year of the player that they traded, PK Subban for. Remember, they've been without the assets that they gave up for PK Subban for almost a year in Montreal. And Shea Weber is more than. I mean, this is the guy they make captain when he's injured. That's how. I mean, this important Shea Weber is his team. He is a quarterback. Extreme, like he makes everybody better on the ice.
It couldn't have happened at a better time for them. And Peter, because Montreal's lost 4 games in a row. Mm-hmm. The shine is starting to come off of that team. Carey Price has not been able to. I still don't think he's the Carey.
Not been able to get it together. He just hasn't.
And in the end, Peter, that's the big thing. If Carey Price is maybe 80% of what he used to be, that 20% was what got them wins.
Yeah,
and that's
you
tough.
Couldn't summarize it any better than that, Mike. That's exactly it.
Yeah,
and there's what 6 more years of this Carey Price.
7 million? This is year 1 of the 8-year deal. So.
God.
Well, I mean, this is the problem, and we can do a show on this, Zach. This is the problem with the teams that were successful, like Chicago, like LA, like Montreal to an extent, with Price especially. Price was the key player. The Rangers with Henrik Lundqvist. You're locked up on 6 and 7 more years of contracts with players in their early 30s who are clearly – who are starting to or clearly declining, and what the hell are your organizations going to do? I mean, the CBA, the next CBA may have to find some way of letting teams buy out these players and give them their money, but let them be able to another compliance buyout, because these teams are crippled.
It's 100% on the table, I think, and I think for the NHLPA not to let it be is silly, because your players are still going to get an insane amount of money. Because who's, I mean, let's take Keith Seabrook.
Way of getting out of these contracts. Like there might be more money to be had if the teams actually know they could possibly get out.
Yeah. Well, take Seabrook. Seabrook will make a boatload of money, and he'll still be able to play hockey.
Right. I mean, that I don't think the PA would be against this, because if the players get their money, the teams can take it off the books, clear these salaries, because other players will get the money because they cleared out the salary.
Resets it, helps make more jobs available for other players.
It's not the PA that has a problem with it; it's the NHL itself. And the reason the NHL has a problem with it is because there are owners in markets that aren't able to spend crazy amounts of money, that are going to think this is going to play to the big markets, right? They're going to think that, okay, this is going to allow Philadelphia and Detroit and Toronto not to pay attention to what they're doing as much and be able to be, and just go wild, go hog wild. They think the way that's always been the issue, because I brought up for years my biggest thing, which is at the trade deadline, that there should be a Ray Bork rule that if you are in the expiring year of your contract and you're a UFA, going to be a UFA, that you should be able to be traded at like half a cap hit or some kind of reduction. That player to keep playing in the NHL through the playoffs if you're on a team that's out of it or whatever. And but every time I brought that up, I've heard that the teams that don't have enough money, have as much money, think that that's playing too much to an advantage of the teams that do.
Right.
The problem, there are a number of owners out there who do not want the NHL to turn into what the NBA has with super teams and the luxury expense. Because, I mean, you take the Golden State Warriors, right? I mean, they play within the salary cap. It's just they pay an insane amount in luxury tax.
And thank God the NHL doesn't have that, because honestly,
I think because it'd be the Rangers, Toronto, Flyers to a lesser extent, Montreal,
Chicago,
and who else? And Chicago, just
Boston.
And Boston. And it'd be ugly. You'd have problems with every Canadian team not named Toronto and Montreal, and it'd be hideous. So the other thing is then you end up also like Premier League soccer if you go that route.
It's a big issue. So I don't think.
But there's got to be a way, and I think this takes some creative thinking of getting like in these reset points when you have CBAs, of getting players money, which is good for the PA, and getting opportunity for other players, which is good for the PA. I mean, it doesn't put yourself in any corporation. There's nothing worse than being stuck in an entry-level position because they can't get rid of the guys who are clogging up the thing when they should be gone.
Right.
Exactly. I got to go, guys. We got to end the show here, but great show, really fast show, fun times, indeed. And for those of you who don't think that we allow Peter to talk enough, you're right. So I get these messages all the time. Let Peter talk. But the thing about Peter that's awesome is when he says something, it's really well thought out, where we just spurt out anything that comes to our head. So but Peter's the polite Canadian who waits till we're.
What was it? He's Merrill Lynch when they talk, people listen.
That's what we like about it. That's Peter brings that dynamic. So absolutely right. So we're gonna get Peter. We're gonna have to have a show that Peter runs in the near future.
No.
That he actually can talk. All right. Remember, without the buzz, folks, it's just hockey. Enjoy the games tonight. We'll talk to you tomorrow.